Hi, this is a little demo of my application for Flatiron. This is my final project. Here I'm using React for the front end and a Rails application in the back end. I have a um, registration user story that is handled in the back end in Rails. And I have a sign-in user story as well that is handled in the back end. This is all using Rails and Rails authentication as well. So yeah, let's start and show you a little bit of how my application works. This is an e-commerce store, a very simple one at that. Well, simple. I say simple because um, it's missing a few components like the checkout, but it's quite complex um, when you see the code. So let's create a new user. Let's sign up with a new username. Oh, we're gonna have test.com password. Sign up. As you can see, I have welcome Daniel. This is Daniel's cart right here. And right now he has 0 items in the cart. I have a menu full of menu items: hats, sneakers, jackets, women's and men's apparel. And um, if I pick one of these, my front end grabs this from the back end, grabs the data, and builds these cards with the hats in the hats collection. So it goes through each collection. In this case, it would be hats because I clicked on hats, and it would grab I set it to only display 4. So it grabs 4 hats and it displays 4 on the page. I can add to cart right now, and we see how this little shopping bag was actually updated to 1. I can add another one, and we can see how this was updated to 2. We can go ahead and check Daniel's cart when he's ready to go on with the purchase. And well, let's say that Daniel doesn't really want to buy the brown brim, so he can remove it. Oh, okay, there you go. He can remove it. Um, and then he can go back to the shop or go to home, and he can look at sneakers and do the same operation that he just did with the hats. He can look for a specific item, like he can look for Adidas. And well, so basically, this is my front end. It's missing a few things. It's still a work in progress. I'm going to add the functionality for the checkout, the functionality um, that actually gives me a total amount with the values that I'm adding to. I'm going to multiply this by this, and at the end, I'm going to have a field here that says total, right? Because if we go back to shop, we can click on that one again, and I'll have 2. So I'll have 2 times 18, right? And then I can display the total amount over here. Or when I click checkout, I can go to a different component, which I would have to create in React, um, that has the description of the order, and then finally um, another button that clicks that says finalize order, and then the order is completed. The the cart is emptied out, and he can then sign out. I can also apply to an API for payments, which I will eventually implement. All right, so one thing that I wanted to show you is when Daniel signed up. Let's see. Okay, well, when Daniel signed up, I'm able to store the session here, so that he's always logged in. And if I sign out, well, you're still going to see that cookie here, but in the backend, he's no longer he's not longer in session. So that's how I log him out. So let's show you a little bit of what's going on in the front end. I'm not going to go into too much detail because it's actually quite extensive. I have quite a few iterators in the front end, but I'm going to go through just a few parts of it. So let's see. I have my components divided into little little folders over here. So for each component, I have a little folder, and each folder has the JS and the styling for it. I'm using Sass files in this case. All right, so the first user story that happens is basically the sign up, right? That's the page that receives us. So the sign up has an event handler called, well, actually a couple. So this is a form, right? The one we can see it again. So this is a form right here that has a field for name, it has a field for email, and a field for password. So if we go here, we have name, email, password, and all of these share one function, or they have a function that handles the events. And the events in this case for fields is when people types in, then whatever it's in here coded, then that happens. So we have the handle change, which is basically just with the use of hooks, is setting the credentials, right? This is a state variable right here that I created with hooks. It's setting the credentials to be whatever the user types as the name or the email and the password. So the next thing that happens is they're going to submit the form. And once they submit the form, then I have another event handler, which is listening to a submission of the form, thanks to this button right here of type submit. It's listening to that submission. It's triggering this function right here, and that function actually does a post request to the backend. Let's get rid of that. I was doing some testing there, debugging some things, testing out if my function was actually being triggered. So I put a console log there to actually check if I was getting into here. So again, I do a configuration object, which I'm going to use here in the fetch to send the information about my request to the backend. So this is going to be a post. It's also going to have the headers for content type application JSON, which Rails, if this header is here for every request, then Rails builds the params hash, which is going to contain some information, the information that's being sent in the body of that request. Like the user credentials are going to be now part of that params hash. So I go and fetch to my resource users, which I'll show you in a second, and I send that information down with the config object, and then I'm using the data that comes back the way I send it back to be handled by this function that lives in the component app. App.js then triggers this function right here, and it checks if it comes with errors, then set errors, which I have right here. So I set errors to the data that came back, which was an error or a list of errors, so that I can then display them on the app eventually. Okay, so let's show you how the backend actually looks, because I don't want to extend myself too much. This was supposed to be just a short video to show you how my application actually works. This is my Rails application. I have only a few models. I have a user, I have item, category, card item, and an app. That's the application controller. So, model. Oh yeah, model. Okay, so let's look at my routes really quick. I have my routes right here. So the one we're hitting right now, it's a post request, and it's going to the login, which is handled by the sessions controller, specifically by the create action. So we can check that out. We go to the sessions controller, we look at the create, and what happens here is, well, since it's a new user, I'm going to use I'm sorry. I'm sorry. We're looking at the user controller, right? User controller is actually the one that is handling that request. We'll go back to the routes, and we have the users controller right here. This is this allows me to get all my actions, but in this case, I am only going to specify create, because I only need to create for this specific one. So we're going to go to the users controller, to the create action, to see how that is handled. Users controller, we look at the create action. So since it's a new user, we're going to use this method, which is a private method that exists here in the private section. This method, it's only specifying what parameters do I actually need to create a new user. What parameters am I going to permit to create that user? And so these are the ones that I'm going to use. This one works with bcrypt to hash my to encrypt the passwords of the user and store them in a column that I have called password. It's password digest. It's password digest. So that's what this allows us to do: password and password confirmation. Okay, so the create uses the user param specified down there to create a new user, and it checks for validation. So if the user, for some reason, and let's look at the models, if for some reason any of these validations come out as false, any of this is not right, just these, I'm sorry, then the application controller, or I'm sorry, the application controller is going to rescue an error saying that the record is invalid thanks to active record invalid, and then it's going to throw an error, and that's what's going to come back to us to the front end. But if everything goes well and everything was created perfectly, then the user is going to be created. I am actually creating a new card as well, with creating the association with the user, and then I'm storing that user in session. I'm storing the user ID in the session cookie, or with the use of this method, I'm storing in the session object or the session cookie, I'm storing the user ID so that I can keep track of who is logged in, who's logged out. And finally, I'm returning JavaScript object notation to the front end so that I can use that information, and I'm sending back a user with the card items, which initially is going to be just an empty array, and I'm going to be using this card item to put in all the items that I select for this user. So that's basically what happens with the sign up. And if we go back here, there's the other user story, which is the login. And really quickly, this is going to be almost the same. It's another form. It's handled by the sessions. That's the one that I was explaining initially. We're going to go here to routes. So it's another post. And it's going to hit the route login, and inside the sessions controller, the create action. So we go there really quick, sessions controller, create action, and it checks. Okay, well, let's see, is the user, let me find the user by email, because this is the one thing that it's always different. No, not two users can have the same email. So because this is the piece of data that is unique to each user, I'm actually finding the user by the email. And if the user exists, right? If the user was found, and the user, the password is actually correct, or it matches with, thanks to this authenticate, we get to see if the password that was passed by the user, right? If the password that was passed right here is authenticated. And what does that mean? So this password needs to match the password. It has to match the password in here. So this is a column that's going to keep all the passwords that were hashed when I created them here. So I created a password, it hashed it, and then it was stored in this column called password digest. So then when I sign in, I'm going to put the same password, and it's going to be hashed as well. But now I need this method to help me authenticate the user's password by passing it the password that was sent here and comparing it to the password that is being stored in the password digest column. So, okay, if that is authenticated, right, if these two conditions are met, which this whole thing would become true, then let me save that user in session, putting the user ID there, and then send back the same information, right? The user and the cart items. Okay, so similarly, when I log out, all I'm doing is I'm sending a delete request that it's hitting this specific route. This specific route is hitting this right here, log out route, sessions controller again, destroy, which goes down to the controller sessions. It checks if there's a session right now, right? If the user is in session, and if it is, then it destroys it, or it logs them out. Basically, it gets rid of whatever it's in the session cookie right now, and then it sends back. If there's nobody in session, then it says, "Well, you're not logged in. You can't log out because you're not logged in." So similarly, like that, I have set up all the all the endpoints for um, well, let's see, Alberto test.com. So I'll have these are categories, which if we go back, I can see the routes. The routes for categories. This gives me all the actions. Same thing here. Categories controller. I get the index. This is how I get all the categories. Um, this is how I create categories, update them, destroy categories. And I don't really want to destroy them. And again, I have a private section with category params, which requires the category to permit title and route name. So if we go here and I do add to cart, for example, right? This is added to the cart. So this is an item. This is an item. So what I'm doing right here is I'm sending, when this cart was created, this has a prop for ID. And if we look at the components and look specifically to one of these cards, we're going to see that the collection item has an item ID of 1. If we look at the other item, it's going to have an item ID of 2. And that's how they're stored in the backend. So what I'm doing is, and thanks to the fact that I actually also have the cart, right? If I go to app, initially I brought back the username, but I also brought back the cart. This is the cart ID right here. This is cart items, right? This is cart items, and this is cart ID. Well, if I put another card, you're going to see that this one's going to change to 2. If you pay attention to this part right here, I'm going to click another one, and this one gets filled with 3, and that's how I actually, put those in there. I'm going to erase that, or remove it. So what I was trying to explain was that when I click here, what I'm doing is I'm creating an association so that this item is associated to this cart that is empty right now, and it comes back as this cart having 1 item. So let's see if we can show that really quick. Okay, so we go to, oh, this is not the one. So items controller. Oh, let's look at the routes first. Yeah, okay, so we have items, carts. I'm actually thinking, so let's go to collection item, which is where the event happens. So when I say add to cart, this function gets triggered. Handle click is going to create the item that I want to add. I want to send all this information down to, I'm going to pass it to this one function right here, add item to cart, and that function lives in app. It passes the item to add. So let's go to app.js, item to add. Let's look at item to add. Okay, so add item to cart, right? And we say we're going to grab the item to add. we're going to check if the item already exists in the in the in that array, in that that I showed you. If it's already is in the front end, and then if it is, if the item is actually there, then I want to well, this sets the item count, which actually updates the little shopping bag that I showed you. But what I really want to do is show you that that I'm going to send a patch to the cart items resource to actually create the association between the cart and the cart item. So we're going to go down here. I have cart items. Cart items controller. It's a patch, so it hits the update route. And what I'm doing is I'm sending down an ID for that specific for that specific card item, right? So here I'm saying if the card item, if card item dot update, no, I'm sorry. I think I am actually card items existing item ID, right? I'm sending in a config object, which is this right here with a patch, and I'm sending the quantity. Oh, I'm updating the quantity. So what I'm actually trying to. All right, I'm sorry. This is not the one that I wanted to show. It's actually the post method, which goes also to cart items, and it adds that cart item to the backend. I do apologize. I was got a little confused. This application is quite long. So the create. Okay, so the create, right? It's a post. We're trying to create. So I create a new cart item, saying cart item.new. I use the cart item params, and then I save the cart item into the database. And so the reason that the association is created is because this cart item params, if we look at this cart item permit, it has a cart ID, right? That I'm sending from the front end. That cart ID is going down here and it's being given to the backend. And so I'm giving the ID of the cart, and it means that when this item is created, when this cart item is created with this cart item params, then that item is going to belong to this cart, the cart with the ID that I sent, and is going to belong to also an item. Okay, so that's how the association is created, and then what I get is a cart item, right? It's a cart item, which this is it. This is the response that I get. This is the cart item that the backend sent back. And all I'm doing is I'm updating whatever it's in cart items to have everything that's in cart items plus the posted item, which is the one coming from the backend. And that's essentially how this array gets updated to have one now. Two. It took a little bit. Sorry, and it should display three in a second. No, I think I'm adding a few of the same. Yeah, I added the same 3 times. All right. So thank you very much for sticking with me through the whole explanation of my application, and um, I hope this was of your liking, and it was a pleasure to explain my application to you. Thank you.